could you please come sit or step out in the hall? That's fine too. Okay, just so you all know, we did get a bunch of cards, and the vendors have done them by categories, so we're going to try to cover at least 8 or 10 different categories in the debate. The rules, again, are agreed upon. 1 minute for the opening. Mr. Leonick, I believe you were going first in the opening, which means you'll go first with the close too. 1 minute for each question, alternating. And a 30-second rebuttal with the red cards. You just lift it up. You get 3 of those during the debate. And then a 1 minute close at the end. And I believe we want to wrap up by about 20:09 because we'll get the closing announcements in the building. And we want to give you a chance to meet and greet the candidates too. So without further ado, Mr. Leonick, would you like to give your opening statement?
I will, thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Jim Leonick. I'm running for Town Council this year. I want to thank you all for attending, and I want to thank the League of Women Voters for making this forum possible and encouraging and engaging citizens to be educated voters and participants in our government process. My background is simple. I come from a hardworking family that has worked for everything that we've achieved. My background is illustrated on the palm cards that are on the table on the side. I urge you to take one. I won't reiterate all of that for time purposes. When it comes to issues, I believe that my opponent and I can probably agree on what the most pressing issues are that face the town of Huntington. The difference and what you must consider is how each of us would execute on the solutions that are required for the issues that confront us. I believe that I am better suited to listen to the community, build consensus, and get the job done. A few examples of some of the achievements that I've accomplished that demonstrate this. I've been a co-op board president for 5 years, managing many apartments, Boy Scout committee chair, Scoutmaster. There are many other things. I've been an attorney for 30 years, managing client issues. I'll wrap up by just saying that I hope that you consider voting for me on November 6th and you give the citizens of the town of Huntington an opportunity to elect someone to this office as opposed to having someone that is appointed. Thank you.
I would start by thanking the League of Women Voters and the Huntington Chamber of Commerce for making this forum available, and thank all of you for coming here. I bring 16 years of town government leadership experience to this job, preceded by 18 years in the private sector. In my private sector work, I was a public relations and marketing executive, 5 years in my own business. I've used my business skills to solve government problems over the years. I bring to the job a great love of my hometown, Huntington. I'm a graduate of Huntington High School. My father was a surgeon in the town, in this community, Dr. Nicholas DeVito, for 30 years. I've raised my family here. My husband and I have 2 grown daughters, and I am devoted to being a steward for the future of our town, using the experience that I've gained over my years in government and in business, and I thank you for being here to hear me tonight.
We have lots of different topics, as I said. Some are looking backwards, some are looking forward. And the Cergol can get the first question, which is, the town of Huntington was founded over 350 years ago. Would you make a commitment to preserve our history and our historic sites?
I believe I have already made a commitment. I've written 2 books about the history of our town. I have voted on a very controversial land use application involving a property in historic district. I was the lone no vote on that, and that was because of my love and respect for the historic assets of our town, and I naturally do want to continue that love and that passion and protect those assets as I know our community loves them as well.
Mr. Leonick?
I'd be a strong proponent for protecting all of the town's history. I know that we have archives that date back to the patents that were issued by the King to Mr. Nichols and others, and we have some very interesting documents in the town clerk's office that our clerk, Joan, preserves and protects. We have many different historic locations in the town, and I think it's important for us to preserve that history for future generations.
Thank you. And now we'll go into the future. What do you envision Main Street looking like 10 years from now, Mr. Leonick?
I see Main Street looking very similar to how it looks now, because I think that the construction that's occurred has bothered many people, and I think that we need to curtail some of that development and maintain the village look that we all love and hope to have in the future.
Thank you. Ms. Cergol?
I would concur with my opponent on that, only I see more green space, because as we rely less on cars, and our parking lots may not be as full as they are, I know that's hard to believe at this moment, I think we can return some of those parking lots to become pocket parks, pedestrian areas where our residents can enjoy the downtown environment of Huntington, and at the same time help generate patronage of our retailers.
Okay, thank you. Follow-up. Are you in favor of the current revitalization efforts being undertaken by the town in Huntington Station? Please elaborate on what you see that's good or working, and what, if anything, is bad or less desirable. Ms. Cergol?
So this is a good one for me, because I'm one of the early planners of Huntington Station's revitalization when I first began my public service in 2002. We did that by speaking to the community and hearing what it was that they wanted to see in their downtown that was removed from them under urban renewal. We have been moving along, albeit slowly. Recession and disinvestment did not help us. It was not on our side, but you're starting to see progress. You're starting to see a new downtown springing up. Our challenges ahead are continuing sewer infrastructure south of the train tracks. That's going to flip the light switch on for economic development in that part of the area. And I'm going to do all I can to promote the sewer infrastructure that will also protect our water. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Leonick?
So this is an area where I disagree with Ms. Cergol. I don't think that the current changes in Huntington Station are what is required to revitalize Huntington Station. As a matter of fact, just last week I met with members of the community in Huntington Station, and they're not convinced that the construction that is already underway and the construction that is starting is the way to revitalize the area or to provide them what they need. They are looking for revitalization south of the railroad station. They're looking for more lighting, simple things, more lighting, more security, and affordable apartments. The apartments that are going up are not going to be apartments that the people who live south of the train tracks can afford to live in. And if we continue that process south of the train tracks, it would just gentrify the area and force these people out.
Thank you. Staying on that subject, Mr. Leonick, if you could talk a bit about funding for that type of revitalization and future areas of Huntington that might be in need of a pretty sizable investment.
So, you know, any large infrastructure improvements require bonding or grant money. I'd look to refrain from raising taxes for this purpose. Just like as homeowners and business owners, when we have large capital improvement projects, we borrow money from parents, we take loans, we get home equity loans. The town likewise would have to borrow money and bond these types of projects, would have to partner with the county, with the state, and apply for grant money for events like sewer extensions and improvement of our sewer treatment facility.
Thank you. Ms. Cergol?
So grant money is something I know well about. I alone have brought in over $20 million in grant dollars to help fund capital improvements, not just in Huntington Station, but in all of our downtown hamlets that are looking for improved streetscapes, attractive lighting, and other embellishments that make a downtown friendly and welcoming to pedestrians and shoppers. I think there is still a lot of money out there every year. There's a New York State fund that we're looking at possibly winning the, I think it's the $10 million jackpot. I'd like to see that come to Huntington Station. There'd be plenty of uses for it. In the meantime, I would continue to urge staff at Town Hall to comply for grant money so that we don't have to dip into the capital budget.
Thank you. Ms. Cergol, the question is, if elected, would you pledge to vote against any zoning variance for downtown Huntington projects that don't have the required amount of on-site parking spaces?
So a zoning variance is not under the purview of the town board, so I'm going to assume you're talking a rezoning. I don't deal in absolutes. I look at every project based on its merits and flaws. I think there's a place for growth and a place for a rezone, and I think there's a place to keep the property as is. So I don't believe that I can make an absolute pledge as to whether I would pledge not to vote for such a zone change until I would see the application itself.
Thank you. Mr. Leonick?
So in a similar fashion, variances are granted by the Zoning Board of Appeals as opposed to the town board. The town board is involved more so in changes of zone. I think that the question probably relates to some of the issues that we're having with parking problems in the village, and I think it's a twofold solution. One is we have to slow the construction, and the other is we have to increase the parking. Part of the reason that I think we're in the mess that we're in with parking is because so many parking variances have been granted in the past, and I know that members of the current town board are in favor of reducing the number of variances and hoping that the Zoning Board of Appeals will follow suit.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Leonick, do you support accessory apartment permits for owner-occupied homes so that our seniors can afford to stay in their own homes?
That's that's an easy question. I think that it's preferable to adding to the construction. I would rather see redevelopment and expansion of accessory apartments. I'd like to see the process made easier, and certainly in favor of seeing seniors be able to stay here, and perhaps that also ties into having young people be able to stay here, because it would make more affordable apartments available by having them live in someone's home in an accessory apartment as opposed to living in a $2,500 or $3,000 brand new apartment. So yes, I support that.
Thank you. Ms. Cergol?
In a word, yes. I support accessory apartments. I've seen many examples of how it's changed a senior's life where they're able to age in place. I think there's room to expand the accessory apartment ordinance to perhaps provide greater flexibility so that families can also find rental home. Not everybody wants to own these days. I have 2 millennial daughters who pay a lot of money in rent, and it's because they want to. We have changing housing preferences, and we as a town have to be visionary and look for those changing preferences and address them as they come forward.
Okay, and that drives us for, 30 seconds. Yes.
I just want to address the issue of millennials and housing. I've spoken to many millennials over the last 2 years campaigning, and the ones that I've worked with, 50 or 60 of them, hands down tell me that they would like to own. It's just not feasible. So the concept that young people don't want to own, I think, is a false concept.
Thank you. All right, Ms. Cergol, on the topic of younger fellow citizens, if there were 2 things you could do in Huntington to keep our young people here, whether they're high school graduates looking for jobs and trades and looking for a place to live, or whether they're college or post, graduate school professionals, what would you suggest? What would you be looking to do to get them to come back from school, to settle in Huntington, to live here, and be the next generation of decision makers?
Well, I know in my case, our daughters left Long Island, Huntington, because of employment opportunities in New York City. If there were employment opportunities out here for them, they would have stayed. So I think we need to attract industry into our business corridors. We also have to help create cool downtowns, because that's where they want to live. They're living in urban spaces because that's the kind of environment that excites them. Eventually they may grow out of that. So I think that attracting industry, growing the economic base, and keep up our work in creating cool downtowns is the answer.
Thank you. Mr. Leonick?
So I think we agree in part on this and disagree in another part. And we agree on the fact that we need to expand employment opportunities for young people here in Huntington. I think particularly ripe for improvement is the 110 corridor, with a lot of empty office space that perhaps needs to be redesigned and re-outfitted so that we can attract employers that will have good paying jobs to keep young people here. As far as cool downtowns, young people are moving where the jobs are. Many of them are coming from the suburbs. A lot of them would like to live in the suburbs. Do they enjoy the fact that in Brooklyn there are quick train rides to Manhattan? Yes, they do. But once they're there for 5 years or more and they want to start their families, they want to be able to come back here and they want to live in a suburban environment, not an urban environment.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Mr. Leonick, this one's for you. What's your plan to improve transportation options within the town, and why?
I think that we could make better use of shuttles that take people from parking lots to places they want to go in various parts of the village. I think that we could make better use of our HART bus system. I see HART buses all over town. I live in East Northport. My office is on Larkfield Road in East Northport. I see HART buses all day long go up and down Larkfield Road that have 2 and 3 people on it. This is a system that I think we could repurpose. I know that there are young people that live in parts of town, particularly Huntington Station, that can't get to particular after-school and sports activities they'd like to get to because they don't have transportation. I'd like to see us use those HART buses for that purpose, to get kids out of the environment that they're in and into other activities they'd like to enjoy.
Thank you. Mr.
So, Mr. Leonick took the words right out of my mouth. I 100% agree with HART Bus. It's been underutilized. We need to do a reassessment of that, and we need to do a campaign to promote ridership of buses in our urban centers. People ride buses all the time, and we don't do that here out on Long Island. We need to change those habits. I also believe we have to be thinking ahead for East Side access and planning for our residents to be able to access that when it comes to our Huntington train station.
Thank you. We all know that Sears filed for Chapter 11 this week, and it's a commentary, in a way, of the state of retail in malls, too. And someone made a comment in the press about kids don't go to malls, and if they are in malls, Sears is, or sadly, is the last place they go. We have a rather large mall investment and footprint here at Walt Whitman and in the surrounding area. What do you envision happening to that real estate? Because retail, for most people, means an Amazon Prime delivery, and it may get worse before it gets better. Okay, so that one will go to Ms.
Yes, we are turning into an internet economy, and this is something that worries me about not only our downtowns, but also our malls. I've spoken about this frequently, that we need to readjust our thinking. We have to start looking at our downtowns and our malls in different ways. We have to start responding to the preferences for housing and needs and other uses. You see right now, Huntington Downtown Village has become largely a entertainment and service economy. That's because our retail is receding. That new entertainment economy is creating the parking crunch. Perhaps we have to start looking at our malls in the same way, our Melville corridor. There are opportunities there for the housing to keep our young people, as well as additional entertainment opportunities that might attract our young people and keep them here at home.
Thank you. Mr. Leonard?
So I believe in the market-driven economy, and at the moment the Walt Whitman Mall is full. It's been revitalized recently. It has high-end stores. I'm sure they pay very good rents, and I believe in the strength of capitalism and the owners of the shopping center, those that manage the shopping center. I believe they're in the best position to determine what happens with their investment as time goes on. However, I think we need to be open to potential changes in zoning and different uses of that mall as time changes. Just like I think we need to be open to different uses for some of the office space down the 110 corridor, because we have empty office space there, and perhaps we do need to convert some of that to living space for young people and others.
Thank you. Mr. Leonick, what role should the town of Huntington play in keeping our water safe for drinking, swimming, and fishing?
As big a role as possible, in short. I think we need to do whatever we can do to expand sewers, particularly throughout the areas that are close to the waterfronts and the harbors. We need to work with our county officials to get dredging done in Northport Harbor. We need to protect the waterfront and our drinking water as well. I think part of that is making sure that we maintain open spaces and that we maintain the zoning code that we have for a lot of the last parcels in town that feed water into the aquifer and water that eventually becomes runoff and goes down towards the harbors.
Thank you. Ms. Cergol?
So this falls into the bucket of education as far as I'm concerned. Like many things, there are things that we can do as residents to address a larger problem, simple things, avoiding use of fertilizers, being careful about washing your car even in your driveway, and the soap running into the roadways and then into our storm drains and into our harbors. We need to get aggressive. We need to start applying for funding and start building rainwater gardens to start filtering out the runoff that's entering into our harbors. We need to look at all of those 75 outflow pipes that are where the nitrogen-loaded water is entering into our water. We need to address that aging infrastructure, perhaps with screens and other engineering devices to help reduce that.
Thank you. Continuing on that and looking at natural resources in its broader context, water and green space, parks, whatever. Ms. Cergol, this would start with you. It's a difficult line between encouraging business and increasing our tax base and preserving our environment. What are some problems you see, and what would you do to preserve our environment and water quality? So take it a step beyond what you just said.
Well, you know, it's a difficult line. You can preserve your open spaces, and you can also grow a tax base. One example of that would be the Gateway Community Garden in Huntington Station that was slated for development. And the town, under its open space program, purchased those acres, and we created a reclamation of land that we returned to the people of Huntington Station who now farm there. And the idea of that urban park in Huntington Station is to be a feeder into the downtown businesses and the people who will live there. So sometimes you need to balance both of those needs, and you can achieve it by doing both. We've preserved space and we've created an economic generator.
Thank you. Mr. Leonard?
So I see the question more so focused on how do we generate increasing tax revenue without compromising open space. And it's an issue that's near and dear to me because I think that we have been putting too much effort into using up open space and developing space and creating higher density. And I think there are a lot of people out there in the community that agree with me on that. I didn't even finish it. I think we have to come up with more creative ways of generating tax revenue besides building and construction and creating increased density. Simple things like naming of parks, other things like reducing expenses by, if you've read in the paper recently, town of Brookhaven is consolidating services with all of the smaller village municipalities within it to save upwards of $60 million. I think we need to do things like that.
Okay, thank you.
Just a quick rebuttal, not enough open space. Over the last 2 decades, over 300 acres of the town of Huntington have been preserved, and some great parks that generate a lot of patronage by residents who are in town and out of town who are using our downtowns and shopping in our malls. So I just want to point that out, that we have done a great job with open space.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Leonick, this one would start with you. It's very specific regarding the implementation of a 5G network and towers as proposed to replace the 4G network that's already in existence. The questioner is very concerned about escalation in the public's exposure to radiation. Is this something the town is going to vote on, and what concerns might you have if you're elected?
So my understanding is that the town has already agreed to permit the expansion of this 5G system, and that there's a contract between a provider, Crown Castle, and the town to provide service to the Verizon network. I believe that there are federal laws that affect our ability to control some of the expansion of this network. But in the more specific sense, I think that this is something we should all be concerned about. These antennas spread more radiation and spread it closer to the ground, closer to our homes. And in particular, I'm concerned about young people and their development, because radiation affects young people in neurological development. We have antennas like this that are outside people's homes. I don't think there's been any notice of people. I don't think there's been any opportunity for them to complain about the sighting of these devices. And I'd like to see us do whatever we can to limit it.
Thank you. Ms. Cergol?
So yes, we do have the Crown Castle contract, which I was not party to. However, the town sought to restrict in the best ways it could in terms of providing some guidelines for the placement of these repeater boxes, which are of concern to people. We are prohibited, restricted, I should say, under federal law, and the FCC on September 26 came out with further restraints. So it's a difficult issue. We have to wait for it. We have to do what we can. We have to work with our federal representatives to get some answers. I personally would like to see some more studies done because the 1996 Telecommunication Act is based on 1980 studies. There are things that we can do again now in the bucket of education to limit our exposure to radiation, and I'd like to promote some opportunity for public discussion of those things to promote our own health.
Thank you. Ms. Cergol, this is yours. If another major storm occurs, what procedures would you have in place to help families who suffer property loss and damage?
Well, I think that we need to have places where families can come in emergencies. I have been involved in emergency management to a small degree in my experience in government. We need to have safe places for people to come, warming centers to charge their phones, and to enable them to have a warm meal while we ride out the storm and afterwards. In terms of what we can do to assist with property damage, I think that would be probably a matter that would be outside of our purview. I don't believe that we can use town resources to make property owners whole on damages.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Leonard?
So I think that one of the components that will help to reduce property damage would be to increase the education to residents in the town about what they can do when a storm is approaching that might help to protect their property and their possessions. I certainly believe that we need to have an emergency management plan for the town that includes shelters that people can go to in the event that their residence is damaged, and we need to provide notice to them in as many ways as possible about the locations of these shelters, and provide information in the form of the website, blog articles, alerts that go out by text message, anything that we can do to get the message out to everyone as quickly as possible when a storm is approaching.
Thank you. I think you've all seen pictures of the town of Brookhaven's single-stream recycling building just surrounded by paper and other recyclable materials. because the Chinese market's dried up and the glass apparently is very hard to actually recycle. I think every township in Suffolk is scratching their heads and trying to figure out what do we do next with all, not just garbage, organic garbage, recyclables or what? So, Mr. Lake, goes to you first. What do you see as the big concerns that are going to be coming up in Huntington if you're elected, and do you have any insights or suggestions?
So I haven't studied this issue beyond the question and the fact that the issue is starting to present itself, that we have difficulty with where the waste is going to go and what we're going to do with it. I do think that I'd like to see us take some of that waste and find ways to be able to keep it here and either repurpose it or mulch it. I'm sure that there are ways to take paper and somehow break it down and be able to use it and keep it here and keep it from becoming hazardous waste. As far as other materials are concerned, we have to explore creative ways to be able to use metal and glass to recycle it. And I'm sure that I've read many times that in Europe, these issues have been confronted well before they've been confronted in this country, and the European nations are very far ahead of us in these topics. So we look to see what they've done and explore new issues, new solutions for how we can do that here.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Cergol?
So I think the biggest concern is going to be changing the behavior of the resident who is now used to separating their recyclables and going back to single stream due to economic issues that we're not able to now generate the revenue from this recycling that we once were able to. In terms of reuse, I'm a big proponent of adaptive reuse of properties and buildings, and I think we do need to get creative of how we can reuse some of these materials that are going out to the curb. Perhaps creating sandbags or with glass, ground up glass, to be used to prevent storm surge from entering into people's basements. As we give out lawn bags to residents, maybe we can make available some equipment that might be used to protect property.
Okay, thank you. On a completely different subject, but underlying everything, and Ms. Cergol, this is yours. What is included in the proposed budget for Huntington? Tax increases? Do you agree with the budget as proposed?
I do not agree with the budget as proposed. We have some tax increases there that are a 2.45 or the lead tax increase. We're increasing mooring fees for boaters, which I do not agree. Dix Hills Water District is going to be those fees are going to be increased, and the town council is also going to be losing staff that is needed to serve the residents. We now have 2 staff members, and we are being told that the budget will only provide for 1. That is not feasible or a good idea if we want to respond efficiently to our constituents. We are entitled to have someone who is at the desk answering our phones and someone who's able to get out there in the field. If you're doing your job the right way, you're out there, and you do need 2 people. So I do not support the budget as presented.
Thank you. Mr. Leonick?
So the budget that has been presented is a proposed budget. It's not the budget yet. I would like to see some things shaved from the budget. I haven't had the opportunity because I've been campaigning to look at all the aspects of the budget, but I am aware that one of the issues that was raised was cutting staff for council members. And as someone who'd like to start on the council as soon as possible, I'm not looking forward to having less staff. I think that the amount of savings there in terms of maybe $175,000 or $200,000 out of a budget that's $202 million is a bad move. I think that our first line of defense in managing everything that goes on in the town is our town council and our board members, and I think we need to give our board members the support that they need. I think having 2 full-time staffers is important.
Okay, thank you. We have a question on the LIPA situation. It says the situation is critical and will impact all residents in some way. What's your approach to addressing this, Mr. Leonick?
So we're in the middle of litigation. We have mediation conferences that have taken place in an attempt to see if the differences between the town and LIPA and National Grid can be resolved so that that litigation can be settled. One of the things that I think that is most important is to educate residents in the town. In the past several weeks, I've spoken to dozens of people in different forums who are not aware that if LIPA is successful, back taxes, upwards of $400 million worth of back taxes, will be paid back by every one of us that's a taxpayer in the town of Huntington. I just spoke with someone this morning who saw it through and through that this only affected the East Northport School District. That's true when it comes to taxes going forward and school taxes. That's where the biggest impact would be. But if back taxes are part of the equation, or if LIPA is successful in its lawsuit, that will affect everybody that lives in the town.
Thank you. Ms. Tucker?
So indeed, the looming LIPA lawsuit has been an anvil over the people's heads of Huntington for 7 years now. And I was fortunate enough to join the board and have that anvil squarely over my head. And there's no easy answer here. There's no silver bullet. I have thought long and hard about this, and I have listened to the guidance of our town attorney. I believe we are fighting as hard as we can. We have to be reasonable. We have to be open to the prospect of mediation. The East Northport School District voted 8-0 in favor of it, as did the town board, 5-0. We need to be unified on this. We need not to be divided. It needs not to be a political issue. We all have to stand together on this issue, and so to hope for the best possible outcome, and I'm committed to doing that.
Okay, thank you. Town of Huntington is in Suffolk County. Suffolk County has its own government. If you had a magic wand or a genie appeared, what would you want Suffolk County to do for the town of Huntington? There are things they control. There are things that are Department of Commerce. So is there anything that the county exec or the legislature might be in a position to help Huntington with more?
Are you directing to me or to Mr. Lane? Yeah, oh, absolutely. Well, the Department of Social Services and Department of Labor are two important aspects of Suffolk County government that the town of Huntington has actually been able to leverage those resources and bring them into Huntington Station at our Huntington Opportunity Resource Center, because services such as that are most needed by people who have transportation challenges. So by partnering with the county in a memorandum of understanding, we've been able to bring those services closer to the people who need them. And I believe we've made an impact there, and I would like to continue that, and I would actually hope to expand that. Currently, personnel from the county are deployed to our resource center. I would like to see the county actually fund some positions in town government so that we can increase our efficiency there.
Thank you. Mr. Leonick, same one.
So I see the county's function in a couple of respects. First and foremost to me is to expand sewer lines along New York Avenue in the Huntington Station area so that we can revitalize and redevelop in that area. I think that the current state of affairs will hold back developers from doing construction and redevelopment of the existing space. That's one of the areas. Another area is for the Suffolk County Police Department to provide more resources in terms of control of crime and education, awareness, and prevention of opioid abuse. I think these are things that the county can help us with in a big way, and I don't know that we have the resources to do this. There are many different projects that we will undertake in the town, and we need the county's resources to help us as well as state resources.
Okay, and that was the next question. Same question, New York State. Okay.
So when it comes to New York State, I'd like to see New York State help to the greatest extent that it can with the result of the LIPA lawsuit. I know that our state officials have proposed legislation to take payments that we may have to reimburse LIPA and National Grid to spread them out. Our state officials, and the governor's office in particular, appoints the LIPA board. And LIPA is the proponent of this lawsuit. If LIPA is successful, the money from that lawsuit goes to National Grid. National Grid is a foreign company. The money will go to their shareholders. It won't even stay in the United States. So I think we need help in a much bigger way regarding the LIPA lawsuit. I'd also like to see our state officials return as much money as possible in school funding, because our school taxes and all of our taxes, quite frankly, are too high.
Okay. Ms. Cergol?
Okay, I have to agree with my opponent. Absolutely, the state created a problem with LIPA and needs to help engineer some solutions to get us out of it. We need some mitigations at the state level. We need them to start coming up with these solutions sooner than later, as well as the school aid that comes back to our Long Island is not adequate, and our schools are feeling the brunt of it, and I would like to see the state step up there as well.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Cergol, let's start with you. As you know, Huntington Town covers a large area with diverse populations that can vary from village to village. Do you think the present town board structure of 5 people can represent all the town residents, or should a larger, more representative body representing all areas of the town better represent our populations? They touch on councilmanic districts, which were not approved, but could you address that question?
I believe absolutely not. Does our town board present structure represent all of the diversity of our town? I am a single female board member on the town board, and we have a 51% female population here in the town of Huntington. We also have other cultures in our town that need to be represented. We are a community of voices, a patchwork of faces, and we need to do better. I don't think we need to change the structure of the town board to address that, although that would be preferable. It's really up to the voters to do that. But I think we absolutely must do a better job of building bridges into these communities and communicating and making sure that government is responsive to their needs. Often it's those who aren't the loudest speaking that are the ones that need the most help, and we need to listen to as well.
Thank you. Mr. Leonick?
So voters in the past in the town of Huntington squarely rejected the idea of having councilmanic districts where council members would represent different portions of the town. We certainly do have a very diverse town. We have a large town. I think that there's a lot of ground to cover. There are a lot of issues to cover, and I think that the solution to addressing the diversity in the various parts of the town is not so much who sits on the town board, it's how the people on the town board think and how they interact with people in the town of Huntington. I don't think that there's nearly enough interaction with the different parts of the various communities throughout the town of Huntington. The 3 minutes that residents get to speak at a town board meeting is not nearly enough for residents to address their concerns. I can appreciate the fact that Ms. Cergol would like to stay on the board, but I don't see that there are many issues that we're talking about tonight that are gender-based issues. I think it comes down to who sits on the board and how open-minded they are, and how much they interact with residents.
30 seconds.
The town board meeting is not the forum to do the work that Mr. Leonick suggests we do. And it may not necessarily, should not necessarily even happen in Huntington Town Hall, which is not the most friendly building for many in our community to come to. So I think what we need to do is we need to get out into the community and meet with residents in places where they're comfortable so that we can start breaking down the barriers and fear and intimidation that's out there. Show that we're compassionate and inclusive and that we want to make a difference in their lives.
Thank Thank you.
May I?
Yes, please.
So I wasn't suggesting that these issues be addressed during town board meetings. It's precisely the issue that I was trying to identify, which is 3 minutes at a town board meeting is not nearly enough time. And I do think that we need to have town hall type meetings in the community, in different parts of the community, maybe bi-monthly, and invite members of civic groups, fire departments, school districts, anyone that wants to come from the community to address issues and concerns that they have, because we need to have town board members that are up on all of the issues in all of the diverse communities we have.
Okay, thank you. We have one more question, which, be patient and listen, because there are two aspects coming from two different cards. So first off, somebody said, and this one we start with, okay. There's a lot of partisanship and animosity since last year's election, reflecting the national divide. How will you bring our community together and reach across the aisle to your colleagues on the board of that? And then there are two other variations. One is, again, working with the opposing party or across the aisle, and the other is a concern about being independent and not just rubber stamping for whatever party you're in. And give an example about how you might see yourself disagreeing with people. And Mr. Leonick first.
So when it comes to dealing with different opinions, I have a history of being involved in many different situations where that comes up. In my daily practice as an attorney, when I'm in court, we have advocates on both sides of the equation, sometimes 2 and 3 and 4 on each side of the equation. My job in that situation is to advocate, but I've been involved in other situations where I have to attend mediations and arbitrations where the purpose is to resolve the differences, and you have to be open to finding common ground to do that. When I was a co-op board president, we had 150 residents with barking dogs, thin walls, cooking odors, parking issues. You have to listen to everybody and find where there is common ground and how you can resolve the issues for everybody's benefit. So to me, when you're on the town board, the purpose is to be there to represent all of you, and not to be there to vote along party lines, but to vote your conscience.
Thank you. Ms. Cergol?
Well, I'm going to do that by just being the same person I've been for the last 16 years, which is an independent spirit and thinker. I've worked with everyone. I'm a good Democrat, but many people didn't know that in the community, in the businesses that I helped, primarily when I was working on downtown revitalization. When I came to the board and it was noted that I was a Democrat, I got many phone calls from people saying, "Joan, we didn't even know you were a Democrat," because I don't wear my political registration on my sleeve. I've always worked with everybody, and I think that's the only way to work. Partisanship has no place in town affairs. I'm coming in as an independent, not on a poster that I'm part of a team that suggests that you're part of a rubber stamp. You're not going to get that from me.
Thank you. And for your closing statements, there were still several questions that want to know why each of you is uniquely qualified for the job, and how do you think you can fix municipal problems? What do you bring to the table? Mr. Leonick?
How long do we have for our closing statement? 1 minute. That's all of that. Okay. So I'm going to say this in summation, that if you want someone who is going to protect and preserve our resources, our land, our water, try to make jobs available for young people, and try to keep young people here, I'm your candidate. And why is it that I'm uniquely qualified to do these things? Because I have a very varied background. I've worked in many different situations. I've worked with many different types of people. And in every one of those situations, I've had to show results. I'm not part of a bureaucracy. I'm not part of an old administration. I'm here to do things the way people want things to be done and to make changes the way many people in town have been talking about. And when Ms. Cergol talks about being part of a team, yes, I am going to be part of a team when I'm on the town board, a team that has given you term limits, a team that has given you multiple town board meetings per month, a team that brought to you a town board meeting in the community as promised. These are some of the things I hope to work on.
What is the best thing you can give to the people of your town? It's to be a good listener. I was raised by an old-fashioned guy, my dad, who told me it was much better to listen than to speak. And I've made a career of listening, listening to what people have to say, and really going deep into what they're telling me, and trying to pull apart problems to find solutions. I'm a tireless tinkerer. I like to solve problems. This is what I've been doing since the day I walked into town hall. I'm a new candidate. I'm not part of an old bureaucracy, but I have the ability to look at old problems in a new way, and new problems in an old way. As we know in history, it's important to know where you've made your mistakes in order to forge your new path. That's what I bring to this job. I bring experience, I bring compassion, a love of my town, and a desire to make a difference. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you to our candidates. I think we covered a lot of ground, and good luck to both.